Mike Leigh, welcome back to Bullseye. It's very nice to see you. I'm very grateful to have you back on the show.
It's great to be here.
Did this movie start with Marianne Jean-Baptiste or with an idea of some kind?
Well, in a way, it started with Marianne Jean-Baptiste because we haven't worked together for nearly 30 years, Secrets and Lies. And we've been talking about it for a while. We were going to do a film which may or may not have been quite the same as this, but COVID put paid to that in 2020. So starting with the premise that, okay, we've got Marianne, knowing how versatile and great a character actress she is, that's sort of fed into ideas I had about things. But as you know, I mean, I make these films, or I should say we make these films, by embarking on a journey of discovering what the film is during the process of making it. So, yeah, I mean, we started with a fairly blank slate, and then I worked with all the actors individually, and gradually it comes together, and eventually there's a film.
When Marianne Jean-Baptiste was on the show a few years ago, it was for a really intense horror movie that she was the star of about a killer dress.
Yeah.
And I talked to her about auditioning for you. She said that you wanted her to behave as the character. And so for 45 minutes, she made herself some tea and read the newspaper in character.
Yeah, well, you're laughing, but that's what happens at my auditions. And I mean, in the end, all I'm really doing is sorting out those actors who are able to get it and to get the idea and just to be in character. And there are actors. I mean, all I'm really doing is weeding out the sheep from the goats, really. There are very good actors who simply cannot not do anything and be in character. They have to have a script or. So that's what she did. I don't remember. I never remember anybody's audition. I remember what they did when it came to it. Actually, she auditioned for me for a play. We did a play first before Secrets and Lies. And she was brilliant in that. And yeah, as soon as I got the opportunity, I got her into a film, and that was Secrets and Lies.
Is there something that you see in someone when you see them in a film or in a play that suggests to you that they might be able to do?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. I mean, we are talking about character actors. There are actors who are very good at playing themselves, and that's all they do. They may do it imaginatively, and they vary from film to film or play to play. But I'm not. I work with character actors, people who really are brilliant at being different people, not just playing themselves, and want to depict real people out there in the street. That's the bottom line,
I mean, it seems like it's like this a similar instinct to like a street portrait photographer or someone who is drawing from life, like, drawing.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate way of looking at it, I have to say. I mean, people say to me sometimes, where do you get your ideas from? I've only got to walk down the street and pass 10 people, and there are 10 potential films there. It's as simple as that, And yeah, I mean, your analogy with drawing, I mean, I am a drawer, and I did go to art school, and, I was drawing people from about the age of about 6. In fact, my dad, I used to draw on a slate, because in those days, that's what and my dad stopped me. He said, this is going to offend the grown-ups, these caricatures. So, yeah, that's what it's about. It's about real life and people out there.
When you drew a lot, did you think that was going to be your art in life?
Yes, I thought it. I might have been a cartoonist, I think, it's possible. But I was very naturally led in the direction of the theatre and then the movies, and particularly the movies. I mean, I was watching movies from an early age, and I always kind of knew that's what I wanted to do, really. Yeah.
What kind of movies did you watch?
Oh, I watched everything because, I mean, the interesting thing is that I grew up in Manchester, and I watched movies or I went to the pictures, as we called it. I saw loads and loads of films, as much as you could see, but I never saw a film that wasn't in English. I never saw anything but Hollywood and British movies until I went to London in 1960 at the age of 17 to be a student. And suddenly I discovered world cinema, which I'd never seen at all, because you didn't. And that, of course, was an amazing blast,
Before you left to go away to school, what movies do you remember seeing that?
Oh, well, all the cowboy films, all the westerns, all the British Ealing comedies. Right at the end of that period, right at the end of the 1950s, suddenly, and I grew up in a very working class area of Salford in North Manchester. All of a sudden, there was this film where you knew if you walked outside the cinema, the world out there was the same as the world, and that was Room at the Top. The same filmmaker made some very good films. That wasn't one of the best in retrospect, but at the time it was a revelation because it was about suddenly some of the films being made about real life. There were better films, including particularly Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, which was made within 18 months of that film. But when I saw Limelight, the two important things about Limelight was once I would have been like 9 or something when that came out. I wanted to be the great Calvero. I wanted to have that comedy act. And also I had my first screen crush on Claire Bloom. I was at the Bologna Film Festival when they celebrated the centenary of Chaplin in Hollywood. And I was asked to talk about my own experiences in relation to Chaplin. And Claire Bloom was there as a guest and she was in the audience. So I was able to tell this story and say, my first screen crush was on Claire Bloom. This is only about 10 years ago, 9 years ago or something. She was very amused by that. And of course, we saw all the stuff you saw. My uncle had a projector and they thought we'd look at Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and, of course, there were no Keatons around because they'd had to be rediscovered. But there was loads of Chaplin. Of course, there was Laurel and Hardy. And in 1952, the same time, again when I was 9, same year, they did their famous tour of the UK, about which a film was made recently. And my mother took me to see Laurel and Hardy live on stage at the Ardwick Hippodrome in Manchester.
Was your mom a comedy fan?
My mum had no sense of humour at all, actually, so it would be very hard to say she was a comedy fan. But she took me.
Did she take you because you wanted to go or because it was important to go to the thing that was coming to town?
That's right, yeah, the latter. But here's the thing. There were two things about it that were of significance. One, it was in colour, and that was extraordinary because I'd only ever seen them in black and white. The other, which is more interesting still, I think, is this. The set was a railway station, a train station. There was a bench. Oliver Hardy lay horizontally on the bench and Stan Laurel sat upright at one end. But the sketch never happened because Hardy was out of control and he simply giggled and corpsed the whole way through and nothing happened. And they brought the curtain down. My mother was outraged. I was fascinated, of course. And that's my Laurel. But that was part of the whole movie-going experience, although it wasn't a movie.
Did you decide at some point that filmmaking was the path for you? Or did you think when you went off to theater school that you were going to be an actor?
No, I knew I wanted to direct. I wanted to find out about acting. It was a route that could be taken. Innocent, naive as I was, and I came from no sort of a theatrical background, of course. But it seemed, I'd been in plays at school. I'd written plays. I'd done all sorts of stuff as a primary school. I was a teenager. I put stuff on and all the rest of it. So yeah, I arrived at drama school. Absolutely.
You also had this weird thing, which is that you went to the same school as Albert Finney, who had finished just when you got there.
Absolutely.
So you were able to cruise in the wake of the legendary big man on campus.
Absolutely. Salford Grammar School, it was called. And they took because of Albert, they took the Dramatic Society very seriously. And we were in plays and I eventually played the leads, like in The Government Inspector by Gogol and all that. And the buzzword forever was Albert. And paradoxically, or some may think not, he backed my first film, Bleak Moments, not because I'd gone to Salford Grammar School, but he backed he backed Stephen Frears's first film as well. And Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, made a nice film called In Loving Memory. But Bleak Moments, my first film, Albert company backed with complete, didn't interfere and were particularly supportive. But that's just an interesting, ironical detail to the Albert aspect. But yeah. So they very much encouraged me, if that's what I was going to do it, and I did. But no, I arrived saying, I'm going to be a director, and all that. I mean, of course, the idea of being a film director was inevitable, but it was going to be a tough journey to get there. And it took me over a decade before I really, although I'd been to film schools, I went to art school as well as the drama school. I did all those things. But it wasn't until the beginning of the 1970s that we were able to make that first film. But I did I did plays during the 60s.
I mean, it's such a monumentally ambitious thing to make a film, just because, like, I mean, one time Werner Herzog was on this show, and I asked him some generic question about the turning point in his life or whatever. And the thing I remember him saying, it's like, oh, it's when I stole a camera from the film school, because then I had a camera. The elements of making a film are really hard to access.
Absolutely.
The equipment's expensive. The people are expensive.
Absolutely. Of course, it's interesting that now it's much easier than in the days when I first started making films, at least you had to have the money to rent a camera, to buy film stock, to have it processed, all that stuff. You can. I don't suggest anybody does, and some people try. You can make a movie on your phone if you want to, on your cell. But no. But I've heard Werner say that before, and good.
Yeah, he says different stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a good story. But the point is, if you are an artist and you're not too fettered by bourgeois inhibitions about it being pretentious to say you're an artist and any of all that stuff, which we were all up against when I was going through that, then, it's in your bones, basically. So I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do, really.
You acted in a film right out of...
Yes, I did. I did a couple of things just to get experience. I was particularly in a film which you can still get on DVD called Two Left Feet, which when it was released in the UK, the byword on the poster was London's swinging teenage jungle. And I was one of the swinging teenagers. This is made in the autumn of 1962. And I was I was a minor character.
What kind of swinging did you do?
Well, actually, it was the period of the twist. I'm now doing the twist here in the studio.
You are.
Let's twist again like we did last summer. We did a lot of standing around doing that in sequences.
Like we did last year. Sure.
Right, like we did last summer. Like we did last year. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in that. But I used to show up every day. And they'd say, you're not in this scene. Why are you here? And I said, it's okay, I'm just going to watch. It was very educational.
What did you learn?
What?
What did you learn?
Well, they were making films, man. It was about filmmaking,
Anything in particular? Do you remember?
You watch the pros. Actually, yeah. By default, interesting you should ask that question because, particularly at one point, there's a fight scene in a cafe. And it was done in a very old-fashioned way where you kind of said, now you do that, now you stand up, and then you turn to the camera and you do put your arm and then you hit him, very mechanical, therefore very dead. And I remember thinking, this is not how to do this. There's an organic way of doing this. There's a way of using improvisation, all that, which, of course, therefore, yes, in that particular instance, I was learning by default. But that's to miss the point slightly. I was just looking at professional people shooting and rehearsing and lighting and doing all the stuff that happens on a movie set,
Your films are very specifically made, tightly controlled, and developed over a long period of time of improvisation. But like by the time you have people in front of cameras, they're very tightly composed. Was there appeal ever for you in the other form of improvisation, which is to say, trying to put on camera something that is happening for the first time?
No, never.
Before the
Not interested
camera.
at all. To me, that's anathema. It's got nothing to do with making proper distilled art. I mean, some people have done it successfully and some mostly not, I have to say. That you will find very occasionally in my films moments of ad lib improvisation. And you've got, by the time you get to that stage, you've got actors who can improvise in character 100% authentically, of course. But no, I'm not interested in that. I never have been. I am, in that sense, I suppose I'd have to put my hand up and say I'm a classicist, really. You know, I mean, it is about distilled work, which, you know, is precise. But of course, you have to believe, the audience has to believe that you're watching something that is completely spontaneous and real and has never happened before and is happening in this moment. Of course, it goes without saying. But, you know, you don't get random things happening, lines falling over each other. It's very organised, of course. But that's what, apart from anything else, and this is a slight red herring, I have to say, but it's worth throwing in, because by the time I got to make films anyway, I'd already done about 20 odd stage plays, and I'd done I'd done 10 stage plays, but over the years I've done 26 or something, as well as films. And of course, you can't put on a stage play that's going to be ad-libbed randomly. I mean, you can try, and some people have, but it's a complete waste of time, really. It just degenerate from performance to performance. So I was into the experience. I had the experience, and I was into the discipline of precise work anyway. But I don't think even if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have wanted to make films where done in that way. It's not my bag.
I mean, part of the experience that I had watching Hard Truths, which is about, you know, the central character of this film is horribly anxious and depressed and treats people around her really poorly, presumably largely for that reason. And like, I realized as I'm watching this movie that because I've watched so many movies with stories that come out of screenwriting books, I'm like waiting for the hero to transform. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I realized as I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking, well, don't worry, she'll be transformed. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, I don't want to discuss the end of the movie too much,
right,
because people listening to this have not yet seen it, perhaps. In the conventional sense that you mean, of course, that doesn't happen in Hard Truths. But does it absolutely not happen at all? No, it does in some way. That's to say, there is something happens, some change, something is on the, you know, but it doesn't resolve in the conventional. I mean, I've done on a number of occasions, you know, talking to film students, I get asked this question: what do you think about the 3-act structure? And I say, well, here's the thing. Tell me a film that doesn't have a 3-act structure. You establish a premise, you challenge it, and you resolve it. That's the 3-act structure, and you actually don't have to think about a 3-act structure at all. Even Hard Truths, it has got a 3-act structure, but don't think I ever thought for a split second about my 3-act structure, because you don't think in those terms. You think about what's happening. And obviously, I have a sense of, as a dramatist, I've got a sense of structure, but that's comes from here, not from my bowels and heart, not from my head. My feelings about what's going on. I would encourage a discreet taking of a large pinch of salt with all those books that tell you how to write screenplays.
What are you most proud of about your work?
Well, I mean, I suppose I am proud of an incredible number of fantastic performances by some brilliant people, but also, you know, we haven't talked about behind the camera. And of course, my great cinematographer, comrade Dick Pope, died a couple of months ago, who shot all my films since Life is Sweet in 1990. And incidentally, the cinematographer who shot the films I made before that, Meantime and High Hopes, Roger Pratt, died on January the 1st. at the same age as Dick Pope. He was 77. And he was another great cinematographer. He shot all Terry Gilliam's films and a lot of great movies. He'd been very ill for a long time. And these guys, really, Dick Pope not least, you know, they don't just point a camera and say, okay, what's the next shot and all that. You know, it's a collaboration that really explores. I mean, when we made Naked, we really, really shot tests to get the look of it. And the same with Happy-Go-Lucky and Topsy Turvy, you know, just Vera Drake, you know, just to kind of get the feel, the spirit of the time or the mood of the movie and all that stuff. So, yeah, I'm proud of the work that all these people have done, you know, the designers I've worked with, you know, and so on. But not least the performances. And of course, the fact is that people resonate with audiences, resonate with the films in a very particular way. They relate to them, they are moved by them and everything. I'm proud of that, I guess.
When you are working through the characters and story of a film, when you're developing a film, is one of the things that you're looking for what it will be when it is photographed, like what it will look like, how it will feel to see it through a camera?
Inevitably, because, you know, you're thinking about film, I always say to film students, you've always got to have, there's got to be a film in your head at all times. It may be changed, it will change completely. It maybe will change from one day to the next. You may challenge the film in your head, but there's got to be a film in your head on the go. So, yeah, I mean, if you're making a film, you're thinking cinematically. That's, you know, I mean, I think I understand the very legitimate premise of your question, which is am I not thinking at all about that when I'm just thinking about the characters? But you can't help thinking about that.
Well, and also you've worked so much on the stage, which is a very different way of looking at characters and story.
It is and it isn't. I mean, for me, it's not, because
like the looking part is different as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing a play, you're thinking, you've got a play in your head. You know, you're thinking theatrically. I mean, you know that when you're making a film, you know that you're going to be able to have close-ups, and when you're doing a play, even in the more intimate theatres that I normally have done plays in, you know that whatever you do has got to read from the back row. And also, there's a very big difference, particularly with my way of working, which is when I make a film, I don't have to worry about the actor finding his or her way through from A to Z because of the way we shoot films, even though everyone knows exactly what's happening in their situation. With a play, I've got to construct the play so that the actor can do any number of performances and find their way from A to Z, whatever A to Z is within the context of the play, and rediscover it and re-motivate it with their lives going on in the daytime. You know, it's a whole different ballgame. But in the end, in terms of the actual philosophy of the kind of characters and the kind of world we're depicting, it comes down to the same principle. But again, you have to have a play in your head when you're making it.
I think of you as being one of the great apartment filmmakers. I would say, look, of course, Billy Wilder, director of The Apartment, that's going to be number one. Pedro Almodovar's directed some really great apartments. But I feel like apartments are so central to like 60% of your movies.
Yeah, and houses, yeah.
How do you think about those places when you are preparing to shoot something? Because there is both, like, you know, the apartment part of it is that apartments are small. So unless you're constructing sets, it constrains and to some extent dictates the way you shoot as well.
Absolutely. But that's not, there are two separate things in what you've just said. I mean, the way you shoot on location, and the vast majority of what I've done has been shot on location, although we've occasionally shot on location, but using location places to be other places. We're built with sets within locations and all of that, but mostly it's actual location shooting. You know, part of the discipline of location shooting is to embrace the actual location and make it work for all the exigencies of the technical needs of film. But the more important answer to what we're talking about is this. People say, oh, well, you make films about people. Yes, I do. But I make films about place as well. Place is very important. And the collaboration on all of my films between myself, the actors, and the production designer, and indeed the costume and makeup designers, is crucial, and it's not a separate thing that's worked on without consultation. I mean, the input from the actors in terms of what the character would have and the character's taste and all of those things is very important, and the getting us all on the same page about the aesthetic of the film in terms of the real world it's depicting and the spirit, the heightened spirit of what, because none of my films are, we haven't said this in this conversation, but it's important, I think, to say that none of my films are, I don't deal in naturalism. Realism, yes, get into the essence of what's real, but not surface naturalism. And that relates to what we said much earlier in the conversation about the fact I'm not interested in ad-lib, improvised, sort of pseudo-documentary kind of way of shooting. It's heightened and it's very distilled. And that's true about the way it looks as well. So all these things are part and parcel. So if you look at Naked, if you look at Happy-Go-Lucky, for example, you're looking at two films at the other end, the opposite ends of a spectrum. One is, moody and monochromatic, or the other is full of bright colours and things, because that expresses, in each case, it starts with the central character. But that's what I shared with the cinematographer and the designers, so that we could then shoot tests and so on. So it's all, and the same applies to sound, and indeed the music. It's we're all on the same page in terms of the kind of style of the thing.
I read an interview that you did to promote this film where you said, this is a quote, "I'd rather have my eyeballs pulled out of my corpse than go to L.A."
Yes, actually, that was somebody else quoting something I said a very long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say L.A., I said Hollywood.
Okay.
That's not the same thing, as you very well know. And I wasn't talking about the geographical place called Hollywood. I was talking about the cultural institution called Hollywood. Okay. And I didn't say it in an interview for the current film. It was quoted by the person introducing me recently for something. And I must have said it a very long time ago, although it's probably still true. I honestly
just felt grateful that given that context, you were nice enough to come by.
Yeah, no. I'm not working in Hollywood. I'm in LA promoting my British film. That's not the same thing. I meant, of course, what that is talking about, goes without saying, is I don't want to make a Hollywood movie. Why don't I want to make a Hollywood movie? A, because I'm a committed European filmmaker, or if you like, I'm committed to indigenous British films, which comes out of our own culture and our own industry. There's no reason in the world why I should. The fact of the matter is, Amazon Studios backed Peterloo hugely and never interfered with it, and were incredibly supportive. And I've had American backers and indeed collaborators on the financial level many times. Including on Hard Truths, where Bleecker Street came in, they don't just distribute it, they have money in the film. But that's not the same thing as making a Hollywood movie.
In that same interview, I remember you saying that you were offered the theoretical opportunity to direct a James Bond movie in order to finance other films. And this is a purely fantastical. This was a fantastical suggestion, a rhetorical offer. Yeah. You said that if you made a James Bond movie, it would be one about him going to visit his elderly mom.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I got the Best Director for the BAFTA Award for Vera Drake, and so we all got quite drunk that night. And on the way out, somebody introduced me to Barbara Broccoli, who produces all those James Bond films. It was a very nice lady, and there was a spiral staircase, and we were walking down, and everyone was saying, Mike, congratulations, Mike. And then somebody went, are you seeing me with Barbara Broccoli? And I said, yes, I'm going to direct the next James Bond film. And of course, I'd often said what you just quoted, which is that, it would be great to have James Bond, and the entire film is him going out to see his elderly mum in a house, making tea and sitting with her, and then that's the end of the film. So, yeah, I don't think that film's going to happen.
They've gotten a lot closer to it. I mean, the last few are as close as they've ever been to that.
I'll take your word for it. I can't quite see that myself, but you're obviously more clairvoyant about these matters than I am.
Okay, I wanted to read one other thing back to you. This is not something you said. This is something that I ran into as I was reading for this. It's from Roger Ebert's review of your first film, which was called Bleak Moments. You made a number of films for the BBC, for television, but your first film was a theatrical film.
Sure.
So presumably he saw it here in the States.
Absolutely.
He wrote at the time, "There's a new kind of movie emerging in the 1970s that considers with almost frightening perceptiveness the ways people really behave toward each other." And then he said, Mike Leigh's Bleak Moments, it's a first film by a young British director who exhibits in every scene a complete mastery of the kind of characterization he is attempting. This film is a masterpiece, plain and simple, and that's a statement I doubt I will ever have cause to revise, but it is probably not going to appeal to a majority of filmgoers. I thought it was such an interesting, his premise is that it's films about people relating to each other. And he specifically was interested in people relating to each other, physically, through means other than dialogue. It is as great a rave as you could possibly earn.
It was. And, at that time, people were not really responding to that, to the film as one might have hoped. But it was quite positive. And it was released in the States. But that review by Roger was absolutely mind-blowing. And, we made it in 1971 when I was 28. So it was very exciting. And indeed, all his reviews of my films were great. And I met him on a few occasions and he was always incredibly positive. And it was very important.
He still caveated it, though.
Well, to quote another the last line of another famous film, well, nobody's perfect. I've never really thought about it. It's not really a caveat, I don't think. That is a positive. He's being positive,
Do you like it when people enjoy your movies, come out of them happy?
Oh, of course. Come out of them stimulated, happy, whatever they come out of. You told me yourself, you cried watching Hard Truths.
Yeah, sitting by myself at 10 o'clock in the morning in my backyard.
No, well, I like that. It's great. It means we weren't wasting our time on you. It's good.
Well, I really, Mike, I really couldn't be more grateful that you came to talk to me or for your work. I just would say thank you for both of those things. Very
great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been very nice talking to you. Thank you.